I believe we are going through a very interesting paradigm shift with AI, right? It's almost like we're going back to the primitives. It can sound scary and almost like dystopian in that what if those agents all unite and gang up against humanity, right? But I believe as long as the human is in the loop, as long as there's enough regulatory guidance and guidelines around how to use AI ethically, we can prevent those kinds of misuses of technology from taking place. Very often, younger designers may work with more experienced stalwarts in the industry. So how can you actually use their intuition to help guide you, seeking them out as mentors, asking them the tough questions? So I think that's a great way for younger folks to kind of upskill themselves. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So I think that's a really excellent nutshell of wisdom that makes sense at Microsoft because we are in it for the long haul.
Today on Behind the Screens, I'm joined by Jayawant Tewari, Partner Director of Design and Research at Microsoft. Over the years, JT has led design for some of Microsoft's most impactful products, from Teams to OneDrive SharePoint to the new wave of AI-first experiences like Copilot. In today's conversation, we'll talk about what it takes to build world-class design teams in India that operate at a truly global scale, leadership in big tech, shaping user behaviors through design, and what the rise of AI means for designers everywhere. With that, Jayawant, welcome to Behind the Screens Season 2. I'm really glad to have you over here. I want to start this conversation very quickly. I want to know a little bit about who JT is, what your background really was, and what is it that brought you to Microsoft and leading global teams right now.
So who's JT? JT is a guy who tries to be funny. He's been at Microsoft for 9.5 years, thereabouts. I was the first designer, incidentally, who joined the Microsoft Bangalore campus. Prior to Microsoft, I worked with a bunch of companies across both the consumer and the enterprise space. I was at Google for a while. I was one of the first designers at Myntra. I worked with SAP Labs for many years. And many years ago, I did my post-graduation from design in the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad.
Perfect. What got you to Microsoft, and what were your thought processes in terms of getting into big tech?
Yeah, it's just a really interesting question. Having dabbled with both large companies like SAP and then working with new age startups like Myntra, having worked both in the deeply entrenched enterprise space as well as with hardcore consumer domains like e-commerce, I think Microsoft is unique in that it's a blend of both. While a lot of our customers are enterprise customers, we truly aspire to build experiences that are consumer grade, right? And I think it brings the best of both worlds, consumer and enterprise. And I think that for me is the biggest draw for being in Microsoft.
So JT, I'm going to directly get into this. All right, that's typically been the format of what we do with Behind the Screens, right? At Microsoft, you work for multiple products across Teams, Copilot, OneDrive, SharePoint, which comprises of almost 1 billion users globally. How do you essentially solve for these products that are used by anyone and everyone across the globe?
So much pressure. Yeah, it is humbling. It's also a matter of great accountability. Designing for such a large and diverse audience with very varying user needs really requires us to think user first, really build empathy, right? Really understanding who these users are, what are their jobs to be done, and how can we service them. A lot of our effort is spent in demystifying users. At the same time, also understanding what the needs of the organizations that use our products, what are their needs, and how can we satisfy both? Because at Microsoft, because a large part of our business is in the enterprise, we have to ensure that we solve for both the end users as well as the enterprise, right? And whereas end users may be concerned with, hey, how efficient is this tool, or how effective is it in solving for my daily jobs to be done. For the organization, it can be a lot more about data security, about compliance, about governance, and many other such aspects. So it's actually extremely important for us to be able to solve for both. The other thing is, going back to your question, you talked about solving for a global audience, right? And I think one of the most interesting things that I've learned is that our products are used sometimes in ways that we would seldom imagine, right? You would never imagine that there's somebody whose livelihood completely depends on using our products, and even a momentary outage can actually cause significant repercussions and damage to them. So I think that's where truly understanding who the users are and how they actually use our products becomes paramount.
So you'd spoken about accountability. What is accountability when it comes to Microsoft? Maybe one example that you can give around how anyone can be accountable or what accountability really is.
Yeah. So there's so much happening in the world of AI today, and one of the things we have understood, and from shipping fast and learning fast with all the experiences that we're doing with Copilot and AI, is that users need to trust, right? And we need to build those systems to enable users to verify if what AI is actually saying is true or not, right? Is AI hallucinating? Is it telling me a lie? Or is it actually something that is accurate and believable? So creating those systems as a part of the response from the AI, whether it's through references or citations or whatever else it is that helps users build trust, becomes another aspect of how we're trying to do this with accountability.
Beautiful. So when you talk about, again, I'm going to say almost a billion people, that's huge stakes, right? What is the mindset that it actually takes, like, for someone to work on products like this?
Let me put it this way. So we have millions, hundreds of millions, almost a billion users using many of our products. So it's very important that we move fast, but don't break things, right? We're going to take our users along. We can't afford to move the cheese for our users, because that, like I was saying earlier, it could cause a disruption in their workflows. It could be even more damaging in some situations. So we have to be very cognizant of managing change, of onboarding our users, doing it tastefully, doing it with grace, making sure that we're bringing them along rather than just surprising them with a change on one sunny morning, right? So we can't afford to do that. The other aspect of doing this right is to also ensure that we respect all the ethical safeguards around security, safety, and ensuring that nothing we do erodes user trust. Because Microsoft internally, we always talk about how Microsoft runs on trust, but there's a lot of truths. There's more truth in that age than one would imagine, because the enterprise business is completely based on trust, right? And all it takes is for one incident for that trust to get completely eroded. So that's another aspect of.
For example, like I'm sure if I was in a meeting with an important stakeholder on Teams, and if that broke down, I think that would cause me to not trust
absolutely
Teams as much.
Yeah, and the level of tolerance for that is likely to be a lot lower than, say, hey, I'm surfing something on social media and there's a temporary glitch and I'm not able to see something on my feed. The perception of that going wrong versus a Teams call breaking is orders of magnitude.
Yeah, I'm sure. I really don't care about something breaking on an Instagram or anything like that. With that being said, when we were having a conversation, you spoke to me about two different things. One is, and while you were also speaking right now, you said that there is something that we have to be cognizant of is user success and organizational success at the same time. Can you shed a little light on what that really is?
Yep. So a lot of the products that I have the privilege to work on, whether it's Teams, Planner, OneDrive, SharePoint, Copilot, there's also another product called Engage, are all about collaboration and productivity, right? And when you're trying to solve for productivity, it's very different from, say, looking at engagement or looking at conversion. It's not about the clicks, the nudges. It's actually about the flows, the continuity, and overall steering users towards some sense of achievement, right? So much so that I would say in the world of productivity, it's not about the time that users spend on our products. It's actually about the time that you can give users back for them to do other things. So making experiences more efficient, more effective, so that users can get more done in a shorter span of time with lesser effort is actually the outcome that we try to steer towards, which is very different from, say, if you're designing a social media product, which is all about engaging users and keeping them almost like addicted to the content.
Perfect. Another question that comes to me is, when you look at such large scale products, how do you scale products like this? How do you think of scale when it comes to, let's say, Microsoft products?
Yeah, scaling large products which have massive existing user bases is hard. And I was talking, a couple of moments earlier about change management, about bringing users along and enrolling them into the change. So we have a lot of what we call opt-in experiences, right? So when you have a new experience, you try to get users to try it out, sample the new experience, give them a chance to opt into it, observe how they're finding it, look at the telemetry, look at their usage very closely, and then also give them an effortless way to get back in case they don't like the new experience. And at that point in time, nudge them to ask them, hey, why didn't you like what we just offered you? What could we do better, right? So creating these listening systems for user feedback, creating the product architecture in such a way that you could have two different versions of the product exist in tandem and giving users a chance to opt in. And once the opt-in becomes more successful, then we gradually move to something called an opt-out, where the new experience becomes the default, but you still have the escape valve for users to go back to the old experience in case. And so it's a very measured process, and it's purely because disruptions are expensive, right? Any kind of disruption to user workflows, continuity is expensive, so we have to be extremely mindful and sensitive to that.
But then, and I want to ask this off the back. So you sit at Microsoft and you have a lot of access to a lot of data, especially when you spoke about listening systems. Do you ever take on, let's say, if someone, or let's say if you didn't have certain access to certain data points, how would you sort of take any decisions across products? Would you listen to more of your intuition? How would you go about it?
Yeah, I think at the essence, a lot of design thinking is based on intuition.
Okay.
And I'd like to believe that with experience comes intuition, right? So, which is why more experienced veteran designers in any field of design, it's not just about UX, but I would say even if you're looking at industrial design or graphic design, they develop a strong sense of taste and intuition, which actually guides them through their decision-making process. So it's almost visceral in nature, right? Sometimes you know the decision even before you think it. And I feel that's exactly what happens when, in the absence of real data, you still need to take a call. But I think as a designer, as someone who's been in the industry for many years, I would actually go back to my intuition to kind of guide me and, be my almost like my compass, right, to tell me what's the right way.
How do you build that intuition? Let's say if someone is not experienced, let's say someone is new or slightly younger, has only a couple of years of experience, they might not have the intuition as obviously as with your experience you would. But how does someone sort of build that experience? Is it by reading more, understanding users more, understanding companies more? How would you go about it, if I had to ask you?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of several things. One is, they say, right, the biggest learnings come from the mistakes that one makes. I think it's absolutely fair to fail and learn from those failures, because without the failures, I think the learning is always going to be somewhat secondhand or artificial in nature, right? So I think having the openness, or being in a culture where it's actually okay to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, I think is actually very useful for people at the start of their careers. And the other is to actually leverage the power of the community, leverage the power of the secondary intuition that exists. Very often, younger designers may work with more experienced stalwarts in the industry. So how can you actually use their intuition to actually help guide you, seeking them out as mentors, asking them the tough questions? So I think that's a great way for younger folks to kind of upskill themselves.
So more so not necessarily just riding on your intuition, but riding on the other person's intuition. Just literally having the guts to ask the right things. And,
asking the right questions. Absolutely.
And get their intuition on the table so that you have the data or the intuition to work with. Oh, that's a good one for a younger one to sort of know more so about how to go about certain dilemmas or situations where they're stuck in and they don't have the data. A lot of companies don't. That being said, JD, I want to talk a little bit about enterprise products, because most of the products that you build are enterprise-led, which is, can you tell me a little bit about what enterprise products really are? Maybe for anyone who might not know about it. And how do you think about enterprise products and what does it actually take to design them?
Yeah. So what are enterprise products? Enterprise products are used by enterprises. Okay. Well, let me expand on that a little bit more. So enterprise products are interesting in that they, on the one hand, need to solve for the unmet, underserved needs of employees in an organization in the enterprise, helping them, at least in the case of Microsoft, helping them be more productive, communicate more effectively, collaborate more efficiently, so on and so forth. But on the other hand, they're also supposed to address all the needs of the organization or the enterprise in that, hey, we want this to be reliable. We want this to be secure. We want this to be cost effective. We want this to be, a bunch of other things, right? So enterprise products are unique and interesting in that you have to solve for two sets of needs. And it's not always that they are the same sets of needs. So on the one hand, you may sell the product to somebody from the organization who may not be the end user of that product. And they may be someone who's from the leadership and have a very strong point of view on what the organization needs. But at the same time, you have to ensure that that does not compromise the needs of the end users, right? Who will be using this product sometimes on a daily basis or for almost every minute that they are working in the enterprise.
So have you faced a challenge where, I'm sure you must have, where the product is essentially purchased by, let's say, an HR of the company, but when it comes to the teams using it, it sort of does not fit, or it actually fits differently? Have you ever seen that happening where you were saying, right, the stakeholder, the buyer of the product sometimes not be the user themselves. If I want Slack or I want Teams or any other product for me, it is the other team members that actually make the organization-wide decision. So have you ever faced that challenge where sort of it goes unmet?
Well, personally, not at Microsoft. I would say definitely at some of my other stints working in the enterprise domain, it has been the case. And more so because the products themselves are highly specialized in nature. I think the good thing about what my team and I do at Microsoft when we work on Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, Planner, Copilot, these are universal products that you'd expect almost everybody in the organization to use. Everyone needs to communicate. Everyone needs to collaborate. Everyone at some point or the other authors a document or creates a PowerPoint or uses an Excel sheet. Everyone at some point or the other going forward would be using AI. So I think the products themselves are fairly ubiquitous in nature, right? So I wouldn't say I've faced a situation in Microsoft, but definitely when it comes to in the past when you're designing for advanced CRM systems or supply chain management systems, or sometimes even on the human resources side, you would have situations like the one you described.
Got it. A lot of products, again, are very catered towards productivity, right? Teams and then OneDrive, SharePoint, in Copilot. How is it different to design for productivity apps as compared to probably traditional B2C consumer-facing apps?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something which I feel very inspired by, right? The fact that productivity is not about engagement. It's not about conversion. It's not about clicks. It's not about nudges. It's actually about flows. It's about continuity. It's about trust, right? So productivity is, I think, all about enabling human beings and organizations to achieve more, which is like the almost like the central mission for Microsoft. And it's about doing so in a manner that does not necessarily require users to spend more time on our products, but actually give them time back for them to do other things with, right? So it's actually minimizing the effort, reducing the time so that people can feel more productive and more capable.
So you just spoke about how productivity apps are more so about flow and continuity. What does that mean? What is a flow? What is a continuity, which is not what you said that is usually present in a B2C product as such?
So let me take an example, right? So I'm an employee in an organization. I wake up in the morning, I check Teams to see all the unread messages that I might have. Then I realized that I need to reply to my boss. He had sent me an email and he was sending me a reminder. So now I switched to Outlook to check this email and get back to him. And in that email, I want to attach a Word document that I've been putting together. It's a report that I compiled, and I want to share it with him. And then I also want to add a few more people from my organization. So I want to go search for who those people are and then bring them into the conversation and add them on the email. So as you can see, this is a flow of a set of experiences cutting across product silos. It's not about the features, it's actually about the journey that weaves all of this together, right? So I think that is the fundamental point, that very often flows and continuity are not about the products in silos, but it's actually about the user journeys that connect the dots across what our users do on a daily basis, right? And communication and collaboration and creation and consumption, all of these are fundamental user jobs that are not defined by a product alone, and therefore the need for flows and the need for continuity, and to think of it like an ecosystem, right? It's an ecosystem of experiences versus being a single product.
And just a specific feature of a specific product as such.
Exactly.
It's also about multiple products and multiple features and how they continue to flow together.
Exactly. It's like an orchestra of instruments.
Yeah, it's an orchestra. Yeah. Oh, wow. It's really interesting the way, I think, as many times I've had multiple conversations with different folks, I've never spoken about, this orchestrated experience or the entire experience of combining so many products, so many different things together. That being said, JT, we spoke about, you touched upon collaboration. And I'm sure that if you had to orchestra so many products and you had to put them all together, you've sort of done that quite a few times. So can you tell me, is collaboration really a critical skill at Microsoft? What does it take to collaborate with a global team working across so many different places?
Yeah, great question. I would say collaboration is perhaps the most important aspect of being successful, one of the most important aspects of being successful at any large company. It's not just about Microsoft. A lot of large companies are heavily matrixed in nature, right? So on a typical day, you would, as an employee, go through several intersections of disciplines, intersections of geographies, intersections of business units, intersections of product outcomes and goals. So you're going to be going through so many different intersections almost on a daily basis. And the only way to make headway as you navigate through these intersections is to do it via collaboration, right? In a large matrix organization, collaboration actually becomes the only way to make progress, right? Otherwise, you could find ourselves in endless, like we call it as analysis paralysis. So you're constantly just litigating things and not really making progress. So it's actually effective collaboration that paves the way for progress.
So why can a lone wolf not do the job? And why do you think, again, collaboration becomes extremely critical? What if someone is a lone wolf over there? What happens to that person?
Well, for starters, the lone wolf would howl very loudly, but okay. I think a lone wolf can very well succeed in a smaller organization where maybe the lone wolf is the only designer. So when I was at Myntra, I was the only designer at Myntra, right? And I was responsible for the entire shopfront experience. It's another story that I brought it down, and the CEO was not very happy with me. But a lone wolf would struggle to succeed in a large organization like Microsoft because there are simply so many stakeholders and so many decisions at stake that it's going to be impossible for a person operating in a almost like a lone wolf manner to make progress, right? Because it's ultimately about enrolling all stakeholders to align with one's vision rather than trying to control the vision, which is what a lone wolf would typically try to do, right? So
what does it, but I got curious when you said that, right? What does it actually take to align so many different stakeholders together? If you had to align a PM and an engineering, and I'm sure your bosses and everyone else, what does it take to do that?
Persuasion. I think it's a lot about persuasion, but where does that persuasion really come from? I think it comes from really effective storytelling. We often say at Microsoft that 50% of what we do is actually storytelling, right? And the other 50% could be our core disciplines, whether it's design or research or content design or UX engineering. But 50% is actually about telling the story in a way that persuades. It's also about prototyping. Very often people need to see what we're trying to tell them rather than only hear it, right? So prototyping becomes an extremely important aspect of trying to communicate more effectively. And then, of course, there's research-backed evidence, right? How do you leverage user research to truly create that empathy, to truly help uncover, right, the user insights of what is it that could actually make a difference over here. So I think it's a combination of these various tools, whether it's storytelling or prototyping or research, that actually helps persuade, and it's the persuasion that actually makes the collaboration more effective.
Can you tell me one time where you actually had to persuade someone or anyone from your team to, and you used probably all of these 3 points together?
I do it all the time. I mean, I can't think of a single day where we are not actively, trying to create enrollment, simply because a lot of the products that we work on at Microsoft, sitting here in India, are at the global scale, right? So very recently, the Verge magazine published, a bunch of updates on some of the work that the team sitting here in India is contributing to, which is a great moment of pride that we are in fact um, you know, we are in fact creating impact at global scale. So, but in order to achieve that, it took a lot of storytelling to ensure that, hey, are we focusing on the right user jobs? Is this the right way to solve for those user jobs? It took a lot of research to help build conviction around some of these extremely, I would say, hard design decisions. And it took really effective prototyping to say, hey, here are 6 or 7 options in code for us to see. These are 7 ways to solve this, but which is the one that we feel the most convinced about, right? In order to even create that occurring, if we didn't have those prototypes, we are probably just been going around, cycling through opinions versus actually making headway.
And if someone wants to collaborate better, what are some skills that they should practice apart from maybe storytelling or maybe just storytelling? What are some skills that they can practice?
I think one really important skill is to have a point of view and have a very well-informed and convicted point of view. If you had to hold your ground in an argument where you're the only one in the room who believes that the design should be a certain way and everyone else disagrees, the only way you can make progress is to firstly have that strong point of view, to be convinced that this is the right thing to do, and then be able to summon up, hey, I'm going to tell a great story around it. I'm going to leverage user research. I'm going to build a prototype. But I think it starts with having that strong point of view.
Have you done that? Maybe a time, I want to know a time, maybe where you sort of had to build this conviction. And if you were to build conviction on certain things, okay, would it just be reading about data and research and your own standpoints or the products the designs that you build? Or how would you build that conviction internally? Or how would you go about it? Is it only the research?
I think building conviction comes from understanding the user, understanding the context, understanding the business goals, and then to be able to weave all of this together into almost like a single fabric, right? Because it's not only about the user needs. We can't afford to index on a specific aspect of the problem, because the problem space itself is almost like it's a multi-dimensional problem space. So I think it comes from having an informed point of view that is able to triangulate across the problem space in totality. So it's not enough for the designer or the researcher, for that matter, to only be concerned about, hey, this is what the users are seeking, but it's also about, hey, what is our business outcome here? How do we measure success as a business, right? And what does it really mean in terms of what our compete is doing? How does this actually help us differentiate ourselves? Is this the most cost-effective way of doing it? Is this the most performant way of doing it? Is this the most secure way of doing it? So I think all of these things have to come together to build that point of view.
So, JT, can you tell me maybe a couple of times where collaborating, or maybe a couple of examples where collaboration has worked really well for you?
Yeah, I can think of many examples, but let me talk about how when we were trying to work on a specific aspect of teams, it required us to have a concerted point of view across both the desktop product as well as the mobile product. It also required us to factor in how the design systems for these two form factors are very different. It also required us to have an understanding of what the compete was doing to make sure that we are actually going to do better than what they're doing. So this is an example where there were many different stakeholders in different time zones, different disciplines, all working together towards this single goal, right? So it was really beautiful in terms of how everyone leaned in, everyone put the user and the business first, kept aside any other political or other concerns that they might have had to actually focus on doing right by the user, doing right by the business. So I think that's a great example of how everyone marched together to create something awesome.
And you keep talking about users and business. Every time you say this, you always make sure that you're talking about users and business. Can you tell me a time where you had to sort of advocate for the business and let go of the user, or advocate for the user and let go of the business?
So a very painful question. So I can talk about an example, and I think in hindsight, they always say hindsight is always 2020, right? So for me, as a young designer, a young design manager, in fact, I was very keen on doing something innovative, original, unique, creating history, right? Like I wanted to leave leave an imprint somewhere in the products that I was creating and shaping. So I actually took something which was a well-established pattern and said, hey, no, I'm not going to take this well-established pattern, even though users may get it everywhere, but I'm going to try to put my own spin on this. And I'm going to make it look unique. I'm going to make the micro interactions very different, and it's going to be awesome. But when we actually took it to our users, they didn't get it. They didn't understand because they already had a mental model based on a pattern that they'd seen everywhere else. And so the business was like, hey, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel here? And for me, the biggest realization from that whole episode was that differentiation is not the same as being different, right? Differentiation need not mean that we have to do things differently, because differentiation can come about through so many different layers of the experience. It's not only about how something looks or something works, because there's so many other aspects to differentiation in terms of how do you position the product, how do you go to market with it, so on and so forth. How do you monetize it? So the learning for me was that in some situations, the temptation is always to create something new and create something original and unique.
Every designer has, actually.
Absolutely. And I think it's only natural. Yeah. But sometimes we need to curb that desire to actually focus on being more practical, being more pragmatic. And if we already know there is a mental model that works, that users are already attuned to a certain behavior, it might actually be far more counterproductive to try and change that at the cost of making users unlearn and relearn something from scratch.
So this is a beautiful point, because a lot of designers actually have that urge, like I was saying, and like you were saying, how did you manage? I'm sure it was not only the first instance that you got that urge, you must have got something else later on, something else, and every designer gets that. How do you manage to, or what is it that you do to curb the urge of innovating or building something from the ground up all over again?
See, it's not to say that it's wrong to build something new, but I think it needs to be looked at from a far more pragmatic lens, right? Maybe one way of looking at it is to say, hey, have we evaluated if there is already a well-established existing paradigm? And if we have, do we see any drawbacks in that paradigm that may not work in this context or in this scenario? And if we are convinced, going back to what I was saying about having a strong point of view, if we believe that there are inadequacies in how certain things work today, then perhaps it's actually befitting to think of doing it in a different way. But if not, then we should actually ask ourselves, and maybe designers should ask themselves, hey, am I actually paying a bigger price by forcing my user to jump through these hoops to learn something new, versus reflexively using something that they're already so comfortable using?
Got it. But then a counter question to that, JT, is that, don't you think that also somewhere curbs some bits and pieces of innovation in certain cases if you don't experiment enough? Or are you not saying that is the case?
No, I think that you're making a very valid point. It's actually experimentation that finally is the proving ground. Like you could choose to run an experiment with different options, and then it's let the data speak. Right? Let the telemetry and the experiment outcomes actually tell us which is the right option. And I think that's the right way to build products in this day and age.
So JD, we spoke about all your experiences across big tech, how you went into it. I want to ask you a question from a leadership lens now, but reflecting back. If you had to look back, what are really those two things that you wish you would have known before you would have joined a big tech like Microsoft?
Oh boy. If I had to distill it to two things, I would say the first is the importance of patience. Big techs, because of the number of considerations that go into any decision, usually the turnaround times are long. Although that is now changing with AI, we are moving far more quickly than we've ever moved in the past. So patience, I think, was the importance of patience. I think was one, extremely important learning, and maybe even calling it as design stamina. Right? It's actually not about the sprint; it's about the marathon, and it takes a lot of grit, takes a lot of perseverance to see things through. One can't afford to give up along the way. There's so much of persuasion, enrollment needed to ensure that everyone sees things the way you see it, are aligned to your vision, that you're making corrections to your vision, incorporating everyone's feedback and input. So I think the power of patience and the importance of design stamina is the first. The second I would talk about is the ability to influence versus ownership, right? So very often it's almost like, I would say, human nature to think of, hey, what do I own, right? What is my territory to operate within? But I feel what's extremely important in working in big tech, in large enterprises, is to, shun this notion of what do I own and actually focus on how do I influence, right? How do I influence better, and how do I actually enroll people, enroll my stakeholders, enroll my own team, enroll my executives and my leadership to align on something. So
what do you mean when you say, what do I own?
So it's very easy to assume that I have a territory and I call the shots within that territory.
Oh, yeah.
And the challenge with that approach is everyone becomes very jurisdictional in the way they work.
And collaboration.
Exactly. Collaboration breaks down. And then, as I was saying earlier, because a lot of what we do with productivity is about continuity, it's about the flows that cut across products. The minute you start creating these almost like these walled gardens, who suffers the most is actually the users,
yeah.
right? Because then they are able to see almost a reflection of their of so and so company's org chart in the products that they're using. So, for that reason, it's actually not about the ownership or creating these territorial boundaries between products and experiences. It's actually about being able to influence, even in situations where you don't have the authority. How do I influence someone from a completely different product line that, hey, this is the right thing we should do together because it actually makes sense for the users and it adds value to them?
Oh, wow. You don't see this across smaller organizations so much with just a singular product more so than anything, right? You never have to do that.
Yeah.
It's only about probably influencing your manager or some of your team member. But that being said, I was curious to know, JT, why do you say patience, and you said that it's more so about a marathon than a sprint? Can you tell me an example where it was about the marathon and not the sprint?
Yeah. So, there's a saying, you may have heard it, right? That if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So I think that's a really excellent nutshell of wisdom that makes sense at Microsoft, because we are in it for the long haul, right? Look at many of our products. They've been around for decades.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at SharePoint, Teams, of course, is relatively new. It's like it was born in 2016, 2017, but still, 8 years, right, of Teams. OneDrive and SharePoint have been around for much longer. I'm pretty sure, Outlook and so on and so forth. So many of our products are storied products that have been in existence for so many years that we are already in the long haul, right? We can't afford to think of this as being a sprint, because these are legacy products that are being used as deeply institutionalized in many of our organizations or customers who use them. So by default, the context itself is a marathon. But I think the other point over there is that sometimes the risk of thinking of it as a sprint is you think of it as being a point-in-time outcome, whereas with the marathon, you know that outcome is actually still farther away, and it's going to take a lot more effort and a lot more of being together
and convincing,
exactly
and influencing,
to get there.
and releasing.
Yeah.
So, but you pointed out that the context is also a marathon, right? Because you have so many things that happened in the past. Does the context or the history of that product really matter, though?
It matters. It matters because many of the products that I was referring to, right, have a deep mental model association in our users' minds. Um, there are many users who swear by Outlook. They use Outlook not just for email, but they use it as a personal note-taking mechanism. There are users for whom a glitch in Teams can basically ruin their entire day because all their communications, all their collaboration could come to a standstill. So these are products, and as I was saying earlier, it's not unfair to say that many people's livelihoods depend on these products being, these products showing up well for those users. So from that standpoint, these are storied products. They have a deep significance for our users, and therefore, yes.
So so I'm sure you must have sort of been through certain bits and pieces of history and historical thoughts on what worked before, what worked back in 2023, what failed back in 2023. I'm assuming for it to actually work. Does it actually work or make sense in 2025? Probably. I'm assuming that you must have done that across different products, because if you're saying history matters, there have been cases and many times where I've heard companies have not really understood what had broken in the past, what had not worked, what users disliked before, and really just built it on an existing context, but they're actually failing.
Again, I'm feeling very philosophical, so I'll share one more quote. And this one it goes like this, right? That history teaches us that those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. So I think the point here is that very often, not being aware of the past attempts, trials, tribulations can actually force us to kind of be just revisiting history all over again, right? But the good news is at Microsoft, we have so many folks who've been around for decades, right? Many members of our leadership team have been around for 20 plus years. So actually, there is a huge pool of tacit knowledge existing within the company. And many people, they're like the wise folks in the company. Hey, you know what? 15 years ago, we tried this, it didn't work. But at the same time, given how technology advances, what may have been ahead of its time 15 years ago may actually be right, in the right time, in the right kind of space today, right? So we have to be aware that while things may not have worked in the past, things keep changing, right? The landscape keeps shifting. So it's not enough to just discredit something because it was done earlier, but it actually would help to learn why did it not work earlier, and what can we take as a learning from the past that will guide us in the future.
Perfect. So JD, we spoke about 2 skills that you wish you would have known before you joined Microsoft. Can you tell me 2 skills that designers who want to join an AI first big tech company should really know before they join it?
Rather than skills, I would like to think of what should be the 2 mindset shifts that designers, researchers need to adopt. I would say the first is about curiosity, because there's simply so much happening out there. It's sometimes impossible to even keep up, right, with the sheer pace of, how quickly things are changing and how there are completely new companies, startups coming up with some super interesting, fascinating stuff with AI. So I think curiosity is absolutely required. One needs to be super curious to know what's going on. And it's not even, hey, how are these things going to affect design, but how is it going to affect product making? Because with the discipline boundaries becoming fuzzier now, there's nothing to prevent a PM from creating like some kind of a basic spec for the UI. There's nothing to prevent a designer from creating a very initial version of what the coded prototype could be. So I think some of these, I think it's a healthy upskilling across all the disciplines. I think curiosity is the one. The other one I think is about agency, right? Agency not as in pineapple as an agency, but agency as in from the standpoint of truly seizing the moment and making progress, right? And doing something with it. Because curiosity by itself, sure, I'm being curious, but where is all that curiosity going? What am I channeling it towards? I think the channel is actually agency. Do something, right? Create something and be hands-on, because until unless one is being hands-on and challenging the status quo of how we have done things in the past, the curiosity remains just an academic exercise, right? It has to translate into something tangible. And that's where I believe agency makes a big difference. I would say these two aspects of a mindset change are very critical for us to equip ourselves for the future.
Are you saying that agency means being hands-on and getting things done? Does that mean what it is? Or
Yeah.
maybe you can explain.
I think at one level, it is about being hands-on and getting things done, but it's also about, at a more philosophical kind of plane, being in control of my own destiny, right? So far, I thought that being a UX designer meant all of those things, all of these things, right? It was almost like a very well-defined set of things that a UX designer would do. There would be some things that an engineer would do. But I feel that's no longer the case, because it's almost like you now have almost like a very amorphous definition of what these disciplines could be. And therefore, it requires agency in terms of really challenging ourselves to think of ourselves as being product makers in a more holistic, in a more complete way.
Got it. So you spoke about agency and curiosity as two things that would help someone navigate or get into a big tech. Can you tell me, JD, what are some skills that would actually make them stand out within an organization that has over 2 lakh employees like Microsoft?
Yeah. So yes, curiosity and agency for sure are like, almost like a new mindset that people would need to adopt. In terms of standing out, an analogy I can draw is that, hey, in order to really stand out in a large company, it's not about creating that one ripple in the pond. It's actually about creating a wave, right? Because everyone could create a ripple, and that ripple remains a ripple. But the fact of the matter is, a wave is something that everyone stops to notice, right? So what does it really take to create a wave? I think it's about consistency. It's about the repeatability of your success, about being able to recreate that success in different circumstances and scenarios. It may not be a success in the same product line. Maybe you move from one product to another, but you're still equally successful, or maybe even more successful, right? So I think it comes down to the consistency, the repeatability, the resilience, the versatility. All of these things actually come together. But net, it's not about that one flash in the pan. It's actually about consistent, repeating success.
Love it. But how does someone actually consistently try building that success? Does that also take patience, or is that success constantly seen through multiple things?
No, of course, it definitely takes a lot of patience. It goes back to the point I was making earlier about adaptability, right? So on the one hand, we need our experiences that we craft and we deliver to be adaptive to different user cohorts, but it also takes tremendous adaptability from the employees, from the designers, from the researchers to adapt to different constraints. Microsoft is a company of companies, and you would find that every org has its own culture, right? It's like they have their own way of doing things, their own rituals, so on and so forth. So I think it also takes resilience to be able to operate successfully, no matter which organization you're a part of within Microsoft.
So, from what I understand, building success is a combination of multiple skills, not just your core skill or your core technical skill. It could be a combination of resilience. It could be a combination of influence and a lot of other things that you spoke about, adaptability, like I said.
Absolutely. And it's also about being at the right place
at the right time. All right. Okay. But while doing that, I think something that I wanted to cover was around trust, because I think if someone does not trust you in an organization so vast where you're working with so many different peers across so many different products, you might not do justice. So how does, let's say, someone who's a manager build trust in an organization that's so expansive?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, given you're asking about managers in particular, right? And what does it really take to be successful and effective as a manager? The way I have internalized this and through my own learnings and mistakes along the way is that management is about three axes, right? On the one hand, you have your team. So it's all the people who report to you, and you need to do right by them. You need to help them grow. You need to nurture them. You need to keep raising the bar for talent. And you need to do this in a consistent and fair manner.
Mhm.
It's also about managing sideways. It's about your partnerships with your functional counterparts, right? For a design manager, it would be in all likelihood there may be the manager of research, there may be the someone who leads the product management function, somebody who leads data sciences, somebody who leads engineering. So it's also about managing sideways with your functional counterparts, and then there's managing upwards, which is basically your reporting line, the leadership team, the executive, so on and so forth. So you have these three axes. And what I found happens very often is that managers tend to index very heavily on only one of these axes, and at the cost of almost like causing problems on the others, right? So I think it needs poise and balance, so that not only are you doing right by your team, but you're also doing it in a way that your functional counterparts also feel aligned, and they're also supportive and being great allies, and you're doing it in a way that also makes your leadership and executive chain feel that their vision is being executed upon, that their guidance and their ambitions are also being fulfilled through you. So it requires all three of these axes to be we need to be very intentional about looking at all three, I would say.
I really enjoyed the way you sort of put this in a three-axis format. It makes so much sense, and it sort of talks about everything that you would have to do to consistently build trust. But what I want to ask you is that what happens if I build trust only in one of the axes? Let's say my team trusts me, but maybe my peers don't, or my manager trusts me, but maybe my team doesn't. What happens in such cases?
So I think what ultimately suffers is the product, and by consequence, the user experience, right? If let's take both the examples that you stated. So in the case where my team has implicit trust in me, but for whatever reason, and I hope that's not the case, my leadership does not, I would find that I'm constantly at loggerheads with my leadership team. I'm not getting their support when I desperately need their help to make the case for something which I feel very strongly about. On the other hand, I have excellent ties with my leadership, but my team doesn't trust me. And when I really need my team to surge to bat for something that is extremely important for the company, I might just find them to be, completely disinterested, right? Or unsupportive even. So ultimately, what happens? I think it's the product and the experience that suffers, and that obviously is damaging for our users as well.
So, but isn't this JD slightly situational as well?
It's very situational, because I would say there are certain situations where you, as a manager, you need to adapt to being a certain way, being what the situation demands you to be. There may be instances where you really need to be a hard manager and push your team to do something because it's absolutely critical for the business and for the leadership. It could be a do or die moment for your product area or for the company, even, right? In some cases, you may really need to bat for your team and give them the air cover they need, because you may realize that, hey, you already pushed them too hard, and anything more could be a breaking point for them. So I think you're right. It's heavily situational in nature. And I think that's where wisdom of being able to choose who you need to be in that situation is really important.
And does that come with experience?
Comes with experience, yes.
Right. Okay. JD, really loving the entire segment on what we spoke about big tech. We touched a little bit about designers and how they can sort of get into the mindset of building or working with a big tech organization, example with Microsoft. I know that you've worked with Copilot, and I'm really interested to know a lot about AI and your thoughts on it. So I'm going to start this very fundamental question. AI and traditional UX, what is the difference?
Firstly, disclaimer, this is just me. With AI being what it is, I need to ensure that I'm not speaking irresponsibly, given it's such a hot topic. But I will say that I believe we are going through a very interesting paradigm shift with AI, right? It's almost like we're going back to the primitives. We're going back to language. We're going back to the written word, right? Because most of our AI experiences so far have been heavily conversational in nature. It's actually about just text. So it's almost like the pendulum is shifting from what was all about the UI, it was about the Chrome, the buttons, the screens, and now the pendulum is shifting to go all the way to the other extreme, where it's actually only about the content. It's about creating meaning through this content. But what's also happening is, as users discover what AI is capable of, they want to bring in their own context. They want to connect their own sources of data, right? Maybe it's their own files or other things. And we call this as grounding. We call this as retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And what's likely to emerge from this is that the Chrome, which had become absent for a while, and it was only about content, but the Chrome slowly starts reappearing into the context of the outcome or the output that the AI produces. So, for example, you could ask a question, but the answer need not just be a block of text. The answer could be a chart. The answer could be an image. The answer could be a video. The answer could be something else. It could even be a user interface that gets generated in real time, right? So the pendulum went from Chrome to content, but I think it will come back almost midway, where you have a balance between both the Chrome and the content. But it's definitely something which is evolving as we speak.
Since you said it, what is the principle of grounding in AI? What do you mean by that?
Grounding is essentially to ensure that you are giving AI the data that it needs to give you an outcome which is more appropriate to you. So, for example, I could share 4 or 5 files that I have authored, and I could ask AI to create almost like a synthesized version based on these files that I'm sharing, but also looking at what exists on the internet, and also looking at what it already has compiled in its own language model, right? So grounding is my giving AI the data, the connecting the data sources that I believe are important for it to actually be more effective. Now, I could choose to do this manually, but you could even think of situations where AI is automatically grounded on search. So, for example, I could search for something, I could see a bunch of search results, and now these search results are actually informing what the AI is giving me, and that's called retrieval augmented generation. So it's retrieving data and using that data to actually augment the generation of the outcome.
So you're saying that if JT has searched for blue shirts 6 times in the last 1 month, AI somehow knows that, obviously it knows that JT is preferred towards the blue color or maybe blue shirt. So whenever it gives you information or your contextual information the next time, it might take that into consideration.
Yes, it could take that into consideration, because it might even create a memory that, hey, this is a person who also likes blue shirts, but this is a person who also does X other things and has X other, Y other, hobbies or interests and so on and so forth, right? So the power of memories is actually humongous with AI, because as it learns more and more about you, it gives you far higher quality responses that are tailor-made for you. So Rohan could ask a question to AI and get a fundamentally different answer from what I could ask, because AI knows something about Rohan which is very unique, and it knows something else about me, and therefore the response itself is tailor-made to me.
But building for AI is again building for a global profile altogether, right? Because the product that gets shipped to Rohan with a completely different context is the same as that gets shipped to JT.
Yeah.
How do you actually make that happen? What are some principles or thoughts that you think of while you're building an AI product?
It's a very interesting question. So the product is global in that it's the same product that you and I would see, but my interactions with that product are unique to me as a user and would be unique to you as a user. I think that's the fundamental difference, because it's all about content, as I was saying earlier. So the content that I'm likely to see has to be something which is tailor-made for me, right? But that may not hold good for all scenarios. There obviously would be certain things that you and I could ask AI and we get absolutely the almost like the similar response. But if I have already trained the AI and it already knows, has almost created like a profile of me as the user, then I'm likely to see far more personalized responses than what you would see.
Does that even hold true that if Rohan likes seeing everything in an image format versus JT likes seeing everything in a textual format as a response, does that even hold true in those cases that it'll start showing me everything image and JT content?
Possibly, yes.
The
and
kind
that's-
of response that it gives.
Yeah, possibly. And it could even be that, hey, this is a person who prefers like the visual medium. Hey, this is a person who has a sense of humor. So let me have a more conversational response. This is a person who would prefer to hear it narrated over audio versus reading it as text. So it could actually explore all of these modalities. And those modalities could be personalized based on what, my own preferences are and also what AI gleans by interacting with me and learning about me.
So do you actually have to take all of this into consideration for designing products like this or not really?
Well, absolutely. I think modalities and exploring how these different modalities work together is absolutely critical, right? One may want to use voice, one may want to type something and then hear voice as the output. One may want to use voice to share the input and then expect to see an image as the output. So it is going to be heavily multimodal in nature, and how these different modes actually work together is going to be very interesting because I don't think we've done that with any kind of user experience in the past.
So JT, now that you tell me about the difference between AI and traditional UX, I want to understand for a new designer who's getting into AI, what are the mindset shifts that they need to really adapt?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in terms of if you had to ask, if I had to ask myself, like, what is the fundamental thing that we can realize now with AI that was almost unrealizable in the past? I would say it's to be able to bridge the intent outcome gap, right? So on the one hand, AI can help users articulate their intent using natural language. We spoke about it being about the written word or the spoken word. So you're communicating in a natural manner, and AI is now able to understand your intent. And based on that intent, it's now going to help you steer towards the best or the right outcome. So an example of this, and it's like pretty well known example that is used very often to make the same case is that my intent is to have a memorable vacation with my family, right? That's my intent. My intent is not to book flight tickets. My intent is not to find the best hotel deal. My intent is not to find out how public transport works in so and so country or state or whatever, right? Those are not my intents. Those are the means to the end. But the intent is it has to be a memorable vacation where every member of my family, where we all have a great time. So imagine that I could just share that intent. And if AI could figure out, okay, this is what I know about JT, family guy, loves his family. They love visiting museums. They love experimenting and exploring local cuisine. Now let me figure out how to go about organizing this vacation for them. Let me go ahead and find the best hotels, find the best attractions, figure out what time of the year works for them based on their school vacation dates, so on and so forth. So I don't have to grapple with almost like jostling across different apps and portals and products and interfaces to realize that outcome, right? AI is able to help me navigate through it. And AI, like a digital assistant, can even go ahead and book those tickets, right? Make those reservations and automate this entire process so that from the intent to the outcome, I just find that I had to do one thing and do it in a very natural manner, and everything else is almost like taken care of automatically.
So how do you design for a product that wants to have intent versus outcome?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like, and that's why it becomes very interesting in terms of if the whole thesis is that AI should be able to understand my intent, right, and understand it really well. What does it really take for users to express their intent in the most natural way? And that's why we talked about modalities. How do you combine voice, text, camera, so on and so forth to just express the intent? And then how do you build great inferencing systems that are able to understand what this intent really means for this user, right? The AI or the system use the memories that it has about this person, the prior conversations that it has had to contextualize the outcome based on what the user articulated as an intent. So I think it's actually a question about making the articulation of the intent really natural and making the outcome something that is heavily personalized based on what, or who the user is or the context of that user.
So is the designer's job going to be in the future probably thinking more about how I can articulate an
Yes,
intent?
one large part of it is actually about the articulation of intent. The other part of it is about delivering the outcome, right? One of the things that happens very often with AI is that you don't know if it's actually saying something which is true or whether it's hallucinating and making things up, right? And for many people, and even for me, very often, AI is a black box. It's not like you can open the hood and then see how the engine is operating because, hey, it is a black box, right? There's really nothing to say that, this is what the output will be because sometimes it can be unpredictable.
Yeah.
So in order for users to actually trust AI, it's extremely important that AI can communicate in a manner what it has thought through, what are the choices that it has made along the way, what are the sources it has considered to come to that decision. So a large part of what designers would need to do is, of course, building those systems that make articulation of intent natural, effortless, but also creating systems that help build trust, help communicate to the user what the AI is doing, giving ways for the user to intervene and say, hey, no, don't book this flight or don't book this airline. I'm not a fan of flying that airline, or I had a really bad experience, or I don't want to fly through this circuit or this route, so on and so forth. So giving means for the user to supervise, to intervene where required will also become an extremely important aspect of the overall UX.
So more so like a very trustworthy companion assistant who will do the job, but
Yep.
it'll always be you who calls the shots.
Yeah, absolutely. And we call that as human in the loop, or HITL, right? The fact of the matter is, while you could assign a bunch of responsibilities to AI, the idea is that the human is always in the loop, right? That the human always has the final say. Sure, we may get to a point in time in the future where the AI becomes more autonomous and is able to take decisions on behalf of the human. But I feel that is still somewhere in the distant future. I think the importance of the human, especially when it comes to something being mission critical or something where money is involved, I'm actually having to, it's going to use my credit card. Now, I'm not going to let AI go and swipe my card in any situation without my explicit approval, right? So I think there will be situations where maybe AI becomes more autonomous, but then the importance of human in the loop cannot be emphasized enough.
It reminds me of the example where people had used Alexa to actually order things on Amazon, and it was the kids who actually ordered it, and the parents had never permitted it.
Yes, and that happens all the time with iPads as well, because many apps have in-app purchases, and
all you should do with a finger.
Kids go on and they don't realize that their parents' credit cards are actually being billed for every little tap that they're making.
But with AI, JT, comes many different user behaviors. What I used to do on Chrome, now I do on ChatGPT. And this is a very simple example that I'm pointing out.
Yeah.
But what are these new nuanced behaviors that you are probably spotting when you're working with AI? And how are you actually catering for those?
Yeah, I think one really important behavior that I see emerging is, and I talked about it a bit earlier, but maybe I can go into more detail. It's about creating more trust between the human and the AI, right? And what are some ways to do this? So while the AI can respond, can the AI also indicate how it came up with that response? How did it think through the various steps? How did it analyze different sources to come up with so-and-so response? How can it give the human being a way to look at what these sources are, maybe go and verify if these sources are legit sources or not. Because ultimately, the internet can be, I mean, the internet is full of both good and bad stuff, right? Like you may have reliable sources of content and you may have like content which is completely fake or untrue. So, how do you give the human in the loop a way to actually verify what the AI has said and to form an opinion independently to say, hey, I trust this. This seems to be legit versus, no, you got this wrong. You shouldn't be looking at these sources. Try doing this again.
So my next question is actually the last question for this round, but it's a very important one. What do you believe is the future of design and AI, and how is it actually going to work?
You saved the best question for the last. Yeah. So the future of design, I feel, is I'm very optimistic. I'm very bullish about it. One of the most important aspects of design is taste, right? And I was talking earlier about the importance of intuition and how intuition gets better over time. But what is intuition all about? It's actually about taste, right? It's about knowing intuitively that something is good or not, right? And sometimes it's hard to explain. If somebody asks someone, somebody asks, let's say, a wine taster, why do you believe this is so and so? Of course, they may be able to articulate because they have developed some kind of a scientific way of analyzing it. But a lot of it is actually visceral. It's very emotional. So I feel designers will play a very important part in upholding taste. Let me add a little more context there. With AI, everyone can create, right? Just like how the iPhone made taking decently or even I would say good photographs possible for everybody. And now, of course, it's not just the iPhone, it's the smartphone in general. That did not make photographers go out of business. So while AI will, lower the floor for everyone to do things which they may have found hard to do previously, everyone could write a poem, everyone could compose a song, everyone could write a pretty good research report, so on and so forth. It will still mean that with all the stuff that is getting created, a lot of it is actually what we call AI slop. It will require that the bar for what is truly great to stand apart from what is mediocre or pretty much commonplace, right? So, and that's where designers will play a part in actually bringing their taste in helping raise the bar for what is truly great and what does not get almost standardized as being AI slop.
So not everyone can actually everyone can write a poem, but not everyone can write a poem that actually resonates with millions.
Yes.
So that's essentially the difference. One more question is that what is the future of products, apps really looking like when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of folks would have already heard about agents, and there's been a lot of buzz around agents in the industry in general, right? But I do believe there is some great truths there that agents will change the way we use technology. So far, we live in a very app-centric universe, right? Everything is an app, and users need to remember what app does what. And users over time have got conditioned to understanding that, hey, if I need to do so-and-so user job, I need to go to this app, but if it's something else, I need to go to another app. So we've created like our entire mental model as a labyrinth of apps. But I think what will in fact change is that we may have one agent that we would go to, and that agent would then orchestrate all of these things behind the scenes without my having to go into these individual apps anymore, right? So the agent as like almost like a universal orchestrator. It's like Jarvis to Iron Man. It basically does all of these things. It understands me. It even detects my emotions, right? If I'm speaking in an agitated tone, it understands that, hey, I must be tense about something, and it's like able to address that. It's able to sense emotions. It's able to get me as a human being. So I feel that's one fundamental shift that I see will take place, that the preponderance of having to navigate through multiple apps will change. The agents will become more and more capable of orchestrating a lot of these tasks behind the scenes. Agents would be able to talk to other agents. We talked about this vacation booking example. So this vacation planner could go talk to maybe the airline agent. It could talk to the hotel booking agent. So agents could have their own language and they could communicate with one another. But it can sound scary and almost like dystopian in that what if those agents all unite and gang up against humanity, right? So I think somewhere there is, for all the science fiction that we've been fed. But I believe as long as the human is in the loop, as long as there's enough regulatory guidance and guidelines around how we use AI ethically, we can prevent those kinds of misuses of technology from taking place.
Are you scared of AI?
Not yet.
Not yet. Why?
So far, I actually found AI to be a great thought partner and a great companion, right? The other day, I was at a hospital. I'd got a echo report for a family member. Echo report said a lot of things. There were a lot of abbreviations of EF and all of that. I had no idea what these things actually meant. So I took a photograph and I asked AI to help me understand this as a non-medical person. And it was beautiful. It helped me understand every word of that report in a way that actually made me trust that, okay, this is something that I know what to do next. Then I even fed the prescription from the doctor and it helped me understand what is the purpose of each and every drug, why the dosage is being so and so. So it was amazing how impressed I was with the value that it was adding. So rather than fear, it actually helped me. Yeah, it helped me. It helped me build trust. Right. It helped me see value. So it was all of these positive emotions versus, my feeling scared.
Got it. And are you saying that, and coming back to the previous thing before I asked, because I thought it was important for me to tell you if you were scared, ask you if you were scared of AI or not. But are you saying that the future of products or apps really looks like a lot of agents working in cohesion together? I'm just trying to put it in a nutshell, working in together to where you would essentially see maybe an agent for just lifestyle and things around it, maybe an agent for just travel instead of 6 booking apps, maybe. And what you're saying is maybe even beyond, where both of these agents are also collaborating and essentially saying what you can do, can you even book it, not book it, etc. Are we saying that's really the experience that you fathom or you look at seeing in the future?
Yeah, I think it may actually be an evolution of experiences over time. I don't think apps are going to go away overnight, right? What is likely to happen is that agents will coexist with apps. Over time, users will start gravitating towards agents as agents become more and more capable, as they're able to really demonstrate that they can do these things well and do them accurately and responsibly and so on. Users will start gravitating to using these agents more and more. Slowly, the apps may start becoming less and less important. There's still maybe a few apps that users will go back, right? And maybe those apps have a special place in the user's day-to-day or the mental model or whatever else it is. So we may never see a day when apps are completely absent, but the way in which we use them and how frequently we use them may fundamentally change. When it comes to agents, sure, there is one universe in which there is an agent for every specific workload. Like you said, there could be a travel agent, there could be an insurance agent, there could be a healthcare agent. But there's another future or another universe where it's one centralized agent. It's Rohan's assistant, it's JT's assistant, right? And this knows Rohan or JT really well, and it's able to orchestrate with a plethora of other agents behind the scenes without Rohan or JT never ever getting deeply involved. But that's not to say that if Rohan wanted to go and talk to this agent, bypassing this, this orchestrator, and wanted to go talk to the travel agent directly, sure, he could by all means go and do that. But he could also choose to have his own assistant take care of things for him as well. So maybe we'll see a possibility of both of these universes existing.
Got it. JT, with that, I'm done with all my serious questions. They were really insightful. It was really nice listening to how you are thinking about AI, because you've been firsthand working on experiences and you understand them. So thanks for that. But with that, I'm going to end this and I'm going to ask you some simpler, fun questions. This is something that we call it the chop round. Okay, this is what Suneet had recommended to us in one of our podcasts, and we've named it that since day one, right? To these, you just have to answer very quickly in a word or in a sentence at max.
Sure.
All right. Light-hearted questions though. All right.
Okay.
JT, what is that one product you wish you had designed for?
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp. All right. And maybe you should talk to Priyanka on this one. But first app that you open every morning.
Teams.
It has to be Teams. I mean, it has to be Teams. What do you think is harder to coach, taste or accountability?
Taste.
Why do you say so? I'm just curious.
I think taste is a large part of taste is something I feel we are born with, or it's acquired over time. I don't think there is a shortcut to acquiring taste. If it were the case, then everyone, you would find a LinkedIn training to go and acquire taste, but that's obviously not the case, right?
Got it. What do you think your team does not like about you?
I'm too serious.
You seem fun, yeah. Let's not say that. What is that one myth about the design world that you would like to debunk here?
Designers are difficult to work with.
Everyone wants to essentially debunk that one. What is that one trait in designers that you would dislike?
Being too focused on their own discipline, sometimes even harboring a victim mindset, which is actually very injurious to their own careers, right? So,
this is someone answered something very similarly in one of these questions, but I think the victim mindset I completely understand. All right, JT, with that, our conversation unfortunately ends today. I really enjoyed every bit of the entire conversation. I really hope everyone else finds it equally insightful. And thank you so much for being here, spending the time and the energy to actually come to our studio and do this. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for having me over. I think it's been an absolute joy just interacting with you, interacting with the rest of the team here. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.